A lot of children are really anxious to get older, and yet there's a lack of appreciation for what it takes to be older and successful, and that is the things you learn in school, particularly in kindergarten through, in my view, 6th or 7th grade. We just need to recognize that that is part of the developmental process, that all the things that they will learn after that are built on that foundation.
Teachers play a vital role in educating children. However, a parent is a child's first and most important teacher. Research shows that when parents and families are involved in their children's schools, children do better and have better feelings about going to school. A child development specialist at Kansas State University says there are many ways that parents can support their children's learning at home and throughout the school year. On today's Sound Living, being a role model for learning. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman. K-State Research and Extension Child Development Specialist Bradford Wiles says that parents can help their children do well in school by connecting what they're learning in school to their everyday life and activities at home. Bradford, to no one's surprise, there was what we've discovered a pretty big gap between the pandemic and the return to the classroom in terms of educational status. Along those lines, though, parents also play a role in education. So I want to focus today on what are some things that parents can do to encourage children to learn, because that's really where it starts, is right at the home.
Yeah, absolutely it does. And in fact, parents are children's first teacher. And as they get into formal schooling, you don't want to maintain that primary teaching role. You want that to be an in-classroom experience. But the support from our families, to use a term we use in our field, the home and school congruence, is really critical to success. So parents, first and foremost, need to be present with their children around school. And they don't have to necessarily help them with homework. You don't have to remember how to do long division. But most importantly, being able to have discussions with children about what's happening at school, being engaged with them, understanding that school is not just a learning environment, but it's a social environment as well, can go a long way towards building both the academic skills and what some term soft skills, but I would call them just life skills, of being able to work together with others, being able to understand what other people's emotions are and respond accordingly, and be able to problem solve together. So it really starts with an environment where what happens at school is something that adults are inquisitive about. They want to know what's going on. And so the more that adults can really seek to understand what's happening in their child's lives, that's the start. Now, when it gets to the academic performance, the best thing that I would ever recommend to a parent is to learn together. So if you don't remember how to multiply fractions, learn how to multiply fractions. I mean, I can speak from experience that the way that they teach math is radically different than the way I was taught. However, I've been able to adapt to that system, and it really starts with wanting to know what your children are doing and what they're learning.
Yeah, one of the things I saw was talking about just monitoring the progress and making sure that you're coordinating with the teachers.
Yeah, absolutely. So particularly with this gap around the pandemic, adults need to be really proactive in communicating with their teachers, communicating with your children's coaches, with their not homeroom teachers, with the librarian, right? Is my child paying attention, doing what they're supposed to do during that time? And again, not leaving out the child in those discussions, right? So understanding what your child is telling you he or she is doing and accomplishing in school, and looking at that through a comprehensive lens of your own view as well as the teacher's view, to really triangulate that and understand the full picture. And it really does start with having an open line of communication with your child's classroom and the school at large. And the more involved adults can be in the school as a whole, that helps. But, recognizing that that is also a huge privilege, that there are many families for whom attending PTA meetings or PTO meetings or extracurriculars, volunteering and things are just very, very difficult to do. So in those situations, really focusing on maintaining that connection with the school and showing your child that you are interested and care about what they're learning. The more that you demonstrate that you care about what they're learning, the more they'll start to understand that it's not solely for their own benefit, but that it builds their relationships at home, makes their relationships at home easier.
Along those same lines, one-on-one communication with children important just to find out how their days are going, how they're fitting in, how they feel about the classroom, what they're learning. So making sure that you take that time to actually discuss how school is going.
Yeah, absolutely. And those conversations are really easy to have a specific agenda, right? We're going to talk about this. And what we as adults need to be able to do, and this is very hard for us sometimes, is let our children take us where they want us to go. Sometimes we'll, really want to know about math homework, but that's not the barrier, right? The math homework, they're not wanting to do their math homework is really a symptom of them feeling like they're not fitting in. So recognizing that these tensions and these frustrations can sometimes be only about the academics, but oftentimes there are other things that are feeding into that give them a barrier towards achievement. So being able to approach your children with an open mind, you want to ask, you want to know what's going on, and then in those conversations, no judgment. Even if they're telling you that they're doing things that they shouldn't do, that is not the time to be upset, angry, disappointed. The most important thing is to let them know that you care about them and that you're glad that they shared with you. Being grateful and encouraging your child to share with you is the foundation of really solid adult-child relationships through late childhood, early adolescence, and all the way through to emerging adulthood. And so part of that achievement element and focusing on the schoolwork can really broaden your understanding of your child as a whole person. Don't get me wrong, we want academics in particular during elementary school, but if we only focus on that, we're doing our children a great disservice. But the converse is, if your child is struggling and you're aware, you can work together to fix that. An example is if a child is not doing well on their instant memory of numbers. Flashcards are perfect for that. Now, I would never, ever want a 3-year-old to be doing flashcards, or 4-year-old or 5-year-old. But by the time you get to 8 or 9, yeah, okay, if that's the barrier. But you don't know that that's the barrier until you're working with the teacher, until you're looking at the materials that are sent home from school, and until you're, talking with your child. And then, Jeff, the final part of that is, hey, sometimes our kids aren't honest with us. Except for me, of course. I was completely and totally honest with my parents.
Me
right?
too.
You too, of course. Right, I'm sure all of us were, except for this generation today, right? These kids today. But, sometimes they will tell us things to avoid what's going on. They'll tell us things to misdirect us. And so being more involved, it gives us that opportunity to understand what their needs are. And some of the biggest challenges are going to result from those conversations because school is different for every child. I was really fortunate. I really loved school, and the academic side of it was great. The social-emotional side was much harder for me. For others, it's the exact opposite. And so being able to have those conversations and be present and available can make the difference for children, particularly when they're struggling academically.
We've often talked about this in the past, but I think it comes into play here again. They talk about connecting with what they're learning at school through everyday activities, because that's another way to learn that maybe doesn't seem like they're actually opening a book and learning.
Yeah, I was one of those. I sat in the back of the room and was like, when am I ever going to use this? But everything that kids are learning in school, there is a practical application in your yard or in your house. Look no further than cooking, which from the parent's perspective is awesome too, because you get a little bit of labor help as well. But there are so many everyday opportunities when you think about all the science elements of friction and inertia and aerodynamics and all of those things. Heck, driving down the road and sticking your hand out of the window of a car and feeling the different resistance, right? The drag and the lift and those things. It's all there. It just really requires an adult to make those connections, right? To say, hey, that force you feel is friction, right? That's the air rushing over you. When you lift your hand up, that's drag. When you put your hand curved, that's lift. We know two things, that linking knowledge learned to previous knowledge or knowledge in practice is really critical for retention. And then the other element is having a memory associated with someone else that will really help that stick. And so obviously the adult needs to serve that purpose. And usually there's some humor in it or something that's really cool that helps children internalize what they're learning. But we've all been able to, at some point in our lives, go from the abstract to the concrete. That is the harder part. We've all been able to go from concrete to abstract, right? So, you're thinking about words and, how they fit together, but then you end up writing something. That's concrete, words, structures, and all that into abstract, your actual writing. But it's very difficult to go the other way. And so what we learn in school is very abstract. So what we need to do is pull it back to the real world, the lived experience, why what we're talking about matters for us. These are conversations that we need to have. And, there's no time like when your child's working on bettering their skills in any of these domains to really engage with them and again, show that you support them, that learning and school is an important part of your family culture.
That's really one of the keys, isn't it? Is just making sure that they really understand and appreciate the learning process.
Yeah, it is. And it's something I have seen again and again and again is that a lot of children are really anxious to get older. And yet there's a lack of appreciation for what it takes to be older and successful. And that is the things you learn in school, particularly in kindergarten through, in my view, 6th or 7th grade. That's not to say that education beyond that isn't critical. It is. But we just need to recognize that that is part of the developmental process, that all the things that they will learn after that are built on that foundation. And it's about establishing or furthering your family culture to say two things. My child is important, and what they're learning is important for their future. And, not everybody's going to become a professor or be, an astronaut. But I think you would be hard-pressed to find anyone who would say that what they learned in elementary school was useless. That's all to say, establishing a family culture that places your child's learning at the center of your focus with them can really go a long way in supporting them, because your children are rarely going to come to you with general concerns about school. They're going to come to you with a specific question about a specific homework problem or a specific problem at school. And so recognizing that as an opportunity to broaden and to understand. And then the final piece is sometimes your kids just aren't going to be willing to talk. Sometimes you're going to say, well, what happened in school today? Nothing. So sometimes we need to be okay with that. If it goes on for several days, that's a chance to say, hey, something's going on here. Let's talk through this. But that only happens if you're engaged and observant and recognizing what's going on with your child. And it can be very hard, particularly in early adolescence. But adults demonstrating that they're there for their children will go the longest distance.
That's K-State Research and Extension Child Development Specialist Bradford Wiles with information on being a child's role model for learning. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman, and this is the K-State Radio Network.